Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/EntitledKarens. In today's episode, despite the will, my Aunt Karen thinks my parents' property belongs to her. Dude Karen at blackjack table mocked until he slunk away. Parent parking problem. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Despite the will, my Aunt Karen thinks my parents' property belongs to her. This happened almost 5 years ago, and I just got notice yesterday that my entitled Aunt Karen has just died, and I got a call from her husband asking me to attend the funeral next weekend, and I declined. As did my older brother, Mark, for purposes of this story. Karen was my mother's older sister, and she constantly interfered in my mother and her children's lives. She never liked my father and always tried to tell my mother that she made a mistake by marrying him. She didn't like the name my parents picked out for my older brother, and my great-grandmother died the day before I was born, and when Karen found out they were going to name me after her, Karen freaked out and said she wanted to name her potential future kid that so my mother couldn't use it. Then she tried to talk her out of it by saying it's too old-fashioned and kids would make fun of me, which they did, but for other reasons, see my username for a clue. She criticized both my brothers and my choice of friends and even complained when I started playing softball, because proper ladies didn't play sports, and if her daughter ever tried playing a sport, she would have her removed from the team. Spoiler, she never had children. The day after my 16th birthday, my parents drove on a business trip down to California. I live in Idaho. My dad said that when they got back, he would drive me to the DMV to get my license. He never did, because on the drive to California, they hit a patch of ice, spun out, crashed, and died. I was a wreck for some time after that. I didn't even want to attend my high school graduation later because my parents wouldn't be there. They will split everything evenly between my brother and I. At the funeral, my parents, who owned their own business, production manager, Tim, was talking to my brother, and my brother told him that in a couple weeks, he would step in and take over, and he was counting on Tim to run things smoothly until then and help him in taking it over and learning the ropes. I had no interest in the business, other than it was a guaranteed summer job when I was growing up, so I stayed out of it and just collected profit checks until I sold my half to Mark, and he continues to run the business to this day. Mark told Tim that he should assure the employees there that their jobs were safe and that no major changes would be made. Then one day, Aunt Karen showed up and began putting her stuff in my parents' office, and when Tim confronted her about this, she said his services were no longer needed and he was fired. Tim called Mark up, and Mark went down with the family attorney, some police, and the necessary paperwork, and had her removed, while she said the place was now hers because it was her sister's, so she was now the owner. As long as I have known her, she has never had a steady job, and has had 3 husbands, not counting the man who called me, never met him, and milked each one for as much as she could get until she divorced him. The next day, I was leaving for school. I walked, it was fairly close, about 10 minutes, and saw her car and a moving van parked outside. She said she was moving into her house and then said in a sickly sweet voice that for a reasonable rent, she would continue to allow me to stay there until I graduated high school. I went in and called my brother, and he again showed up with the family attorney, police, and all the paperwork and had her removed from the property. I was at school, so I didn't get to see what happened, but that night, Mark gave me a business card for a policeman, who I assume helped deal with all this, and told me that if I ever saw Aunt Karen on or near the property to call that number and report her immediately. Don't even try to confront her or give her a warning, just call. I do know that the movers charged her to move her stuff into the van, drive across town, get turned away and drive back across town and move her stuff back into her apartment, which she hadn't given notice yet. I got scared to the point that I didn't like letting our dog into the backyard when I was at school. I used to put her out in the yard to let her play in the fenced backyard while I was in school. For a while, I just put her in the locked and closed garage, and then cleaned up her messes when I got home in the afternoon. Eventually, Karen moved to Colorado, where I assume she met and married the man who called me and said that she had died and he couldn't find anyone from her family to attend the funeral. I chose not to tell him about her, politely said, "Sorry for your loss, but I can't make it." From discussions with Mark, he basically told him the same thing. Outside of myself, Mark, and Mark's infant daughter, I don't think she has any living relatives. I still own the house. Mark gave me his half as part of the deal where I sold him my half of the business, but still sleep in my bedroom. I refuse to move into what was once my parents' bedroom, the master bedroom, go to the local university, go Broncos, and still miss my parents and think about them every day. And even though I am 21 in less than 2 weeks, own a large home, have a lot of money in the bank, I would trade it all to have my parents back, but I don't care about the how or why of Aunt Karen's death. Thank you for reading and sorry for the length. I am sorry for your loss and am glad that you and your brother have each other. Your parents apparently planned well to make sure that you two would be financially secure without them. Spoiler, she never had children. For the safety and sanity of these imaginary children, thank goodness she never produced them. Not all people are fit to be parents. As much as she tried to parent my brother and I'm surprised she never had any of her own. As my brother says, who in their right mind would knock her up anyway? Imagine telling your orphan niece that you're moving into what's legally their home, but she can stay if she pays rent. What a ghoul of a woman. Sorry for your loss and for the fact you had to deal with her at all. That got me too. I was ready to smack the woman. At 15 or 16 you were on your own after your parents' death? My brother was given guardianship of me, but basically I lived alone, with a dog. For parent/teacher conferences or things like that, he would attend them. Sounds like Big Brother did her a solid by keeping the rest together for her. So sorry for your loss. But I'm glad you have a brother willing to stand up for you. Internet hugs to you both. Did you get your license? When my dad was 16, he got his learner's permit, the age here. His mum had a massive stroke that day and died a couple days later. He's 67 and still doesn't have a license. I became paranoid about driving, so didn't get my license until I was 19. I'll be 21 in a few days. I am so beyond sorry for the tragic loss of your parents, and at such a young age too. That is unimaginably awful, and then to deal with that additional stress? I'm sure your parents are proud of where you are in life. Keep going, mate. Love. Hey, BTW, you have a beautiful name. I have a third great-grandmother with that name, well, a variation. On records her name is either Edwidge or Hedwidge. Dude Karen at blackjack table mocked until he slunk away. This is not my story, but that of a friend who works as a dealer in a casino in the US. They shared this experience in their Discord channel this morning, and when I suggested they post it here, they told me they didn't use Reddit much but gave me full permission to post it. I've copied and pasted their post so it's all in their words. This event took place over the night shift last night as they were dealing blackjack. I'll share all comments and questions with them and relay responses if that becomes a thing. The story. $25 minimum, $300 maximum bet table. Everyone is playing like $25 to $100. This one guy is making a point of playing 3 hands at a time at $300 per hand, so $900 per hand of blackjack total. Big spender decides he isn't flashing enough money around, so he calls the supervisor over. Convo went like this. Mel Karen, hey, so can we raise the maximum? Like to $600? Supervisor, you know, this is a $25 minimum table, we can't raise it just for you. Mel Karen, but they've done it for me before. Supervisor, cool, glad they could help you then, but we can't do that on this table right now. Mel Karen, visibly pissed at not being immediately listened to. Well, maybe I should call my host then. Supervisor, visibly not impressed. Yeah, maybe you should, buddy. Whole table started making fun of the guy, saying things like, oh no, he's calling the boss. Gotta call the host. No, call the hose. Where are the hose? Guy makes a phone call, but clearly not to his host, it's very clearly his wife or something. He comes back to the table and the other players are like, oh, what did the boss say? What did the host say? And he tried to bluff and say he said he's on his way. The whole table was like, sure he is buddy, and continued to make fun of him while they played until eventually he left the table. My favorite was the guy yelling, "Oh no! The hose! Where the hose at? Call the hose!" Immediately after male Karen left, he said, "Man, that guy was a prick. No wonder there were no hose. Why couldn't he just, go to a table with a higher limit? Because then instead of flexing on people, he gets flexed on by richer people. That would be simpler, but if drunk, maybe some higher level thought processes aren't there. All hosts do is be someone to placate a player's feelings while explaining the word no to the player. Every time some big spender said they were calling their host, no one that worked there actually gave a shit, since they were going to be the host's problem. I can't imagine playing at a table before a guy like that and making a hit they didn't approve of. They sound like the person to immediately blame you for taking their card. What is a host in this context? Are high rollers assigned a liaison called a host? Just trying to imagine so much greed and pettiness in one place. Parent parking problem. I was originally going to post this in petty revenge, but when I typed it all out, it felt a lot more like it belonged here. The first school where I taught had all parents park and walk in to pick their kids up so we could see each child going with their parent. Because this was usually pretty quick, parents made some interesting parking choices, like parking behind other parked cars if they wanted to be closer. Some teachers started to complain because if they needed to leave early that day right at dismissal for an appointment or something, they would go out to find they were blocked in. Because of this, we started having a police officer monitor the lot at pickup. One day he caught a parent in the handicap space without any designation. The parent didn't try to lie about needing the space, but she did tell the officer she had permission from the school, which she definitely did not. A quick chat with the principal while the mom was in the building resulted in the officer handing the mom a ticket for parking there. She started yelling and screaming and ripped the ticket up and threw it all over. Here is where the officer really made this a good story. He rewrote the ticket, along with a second for littering, just for her being so rude, lying, and generally just not handling the situation well. So, now she had 2 tickets, where it was pretty likely if she had just been apologetic she may not have even gotten the first one. She did not ever park there or block any of our cars again. Parents picking up kids are the worst. I had my kids' ATA private school, and the school had a very well-defined and organized pickup process. But some parents felt privileged and drove to the front of the line to cut in. The school never had the balls to confront them. They should have confronted them and mentioned how they're gonna get cops involved. Perhaps they'd end up with a new building on campus or whatnot. I have a handicapped parking placard. I only need it occasionally when my autoimmune disease is in flare mode. It always infuriates me when people park in a handicapped spot without a placard or disabled license plate. I have confronted some. Once I was in flare and the only handicap spot was taken by a big SUV with no handicap placard at a convenience store. I was getting out of my car using my cane as they were getting in their car. I asked why they parked there and they said, "Oh, we were only going to be a minute." It was a convenience stuff, nobody goes in for more than a minute. Entitlement at its best. I live a block from the back entrance to a school on a corner. The parents have been instructed to drop off and pick up their kids in front of the school by car unless they live in the neighborhood. Well, the parents didn't like that. Now they park up and down the neighborhood streets. I wouldn't have an issue if they didn't leave trash, park on my grass, block intersections and stop signs, let their kids play on my lawn, and block driveways. One of them called me an asshole for putting up caution tape I'd put up because someone the day before had turfed my lawn, and there was a giant hole. I've called the school twice. The neighbors have done the same. No one gives a shit, so now I have cameras and have to time when I get home from work so I can get into my driveway. The entitlement is insane. At my kid's school, I saw a car park illegally right in front of the school, no parking, then saw the council parking officer go past and get her license plate, ticket number 1. She panicked and moves her car across the street to another no parking spot. Officer does another sweep and takes another photo, ticket number 2. She decides to move her car back then to the original spot, cause lazy I guess. Officer makes one final sweep before the bell goes and gets her again, ticket number 3. She got to the school 45 minutes before the bell went and had ample time to get a pretty close legal spot that required 10 more feet of walking. Tickets were about $120 each. If she is sitting in her car, that's not parking, that's called standing. Should have given her a third for being an inconvenience to the team. Earned herself 3 tickets. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.